The divorce papers felt heavier than they should have as I stood on the courthouse steps, watching my husband walk away with the calm dignity of a man who had finally reclaimed his life. How had it come to this? How had my harmless flirtation led to legal documents and custody arrangements being served in front of strangers? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Rema Voss, and I'm 33 years old. Until 3 months ago, I thought I was living my best life as an arts coordinator, married to Jonah, a high school math teacher, with our 7-year-old daughter, Maya. I believed I was confident, bold, and misunderstood. I thought I was writing my own story. I was wrong about everything. It started at Marcello's, the upscale Italian restaurant where Jonah had made reservations for our 8th wedding anniversary. The soft lighting cast a warm glow over the white tablecloths, and the gentle murmur of conversation created the perfect romantic atmosphere. At least, it should have been perfect. "You look absolutely stunning tonight," Felix Ward said, sliding into the seat next to me in the booth. He wasn't supposed to be there. This was supposed to be our anniversary dinner, just Jonah and me. But when Felix had texted earlier, asking what I was up to, I'd impulsively told him to join us. "The more the merrier," I'd said, ignoring Jonah's tight smile when I mentioned it. Felix was my co-worker at the non-profit art center, 31 years old, with the kind of easy charm that made everyone gravitate toward him. Dark hair that always looked perfectly tousled, bright green eyes, and a smile that suggested he knew secrets worth sharing. "Thank you," I laughed, feeling a thrill as Felix's hand briefly touched my shoulder. "I love this dress. Jonah picked it out." Across the table, my husband sat ramrod straight, his brown eyes fixed on his untouched pasta. Jonah had always been the quiet type, methodical, thoughtful, reliable. At 36, he still had the lean build of the track runner he'd been in college, though his dark hair now showed threads of silver at the temples. Did he now? Felix's fingers lingered on the fabric at my shoulder. "He has excellent taste." I felt electric. This was what I'd been missing. Attention, admiration, the thrill of being desired. Jonah was so predictable, so safe. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Felix was looking at me right now? "Rema," Jonah said quietly, his voice carefully controlled. "Could you pass the salt?" I reached for it, but Felix got there first, his hand covering mine as we both touched the small glass shaker. "Allow me," he said, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. The contact sent a shiver up my arm. I didn't pull away. "Thank you," I said, meeting Felix's gaze. "You're so thoughtful." Jonah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. To anyone else, he probably looked calm, but I knew that muscle in his cheek only jumped when he was furious. "So, Felix," Jonah said, cutting his chicken with precise movements, "how long have you been working with Rema?" "About 6 months now," Felix replied, his hand still resting casually on my shoulder. "We make a great team. Don't we, beautiful?" Beautiful. The word hung in the air like a challenge. When was the last time Jonah had called me beautiful? I couldn't remember. "We do," I agreed, tilting my head so my hair brushed against Felix's fingers. "Felix really gets my vision for the community outreach programs." "I'm sure he does," Jonah said flatly. The waiter appeared to refill our wine glasses, and I noticed him glance curiously at our table dynamic. Felix's possessive posture next to me, Jonah's rigid formality across from us. It probably looked odd to an outsider. "This wine is incredible," I said, taking a larger sip than usual. The alcohol was making me bold, reckless. "Felix, you have to try mine." Before anyone could object, I lifted my glass to Felix's lips, letting him sip from the exact spot where my lipstick had left a faint pink mark. "Delicious," he murmured, his eyes never leaving mine. Jonah set down his fork with a soft clink that somehow sounded louder than a shout. I need some air, he said, standing abruptly. Excuse me. As he walked toward the restaurant's outdoor patio, I felt a moment of guilt, but Felix's warm hand on my back chased it away. He seems tense, Felix observed. Anniversary pressure, maybe? He's always tense, I said, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. He doesn't know how to have fun anymore. Life's too short not to have fun, Felix agreed, his fingers tracing small circles on my back through the thin fabric of my dress. You deserve someone who appreciates your spirit. The validation felt like sunlight after months of clouds. This was what I needed. Someone who saw me as exciting, desirable, worth pursuing. When Jonah returned 10 minutes later, his face was carefully blank. He sat down and resumed eating as if nothing had happened, but I noticed his hands were slightly unsteady. Everything okay? I asked, though I made no move to create distance between Felix and myself. Fine, Jonah replied. Just needed a moment. The rest of the dinner passed in stilted conversation. Felix regaled us with stories from his previous job in Chicago, his hand occasionally finding reasons to touch my arm, my hand, my shoulder. Each contact felt like a small rebellion against the mundane predictability of my marriage. When the check came, Jonah reached for it immediately, but Felix intercepted. Let me get this, Felix said. It's the least I can do for crashing your anniversary. That's not necessary, Jonah said, his voice tight. I insist. Felix's smile was charming, but there was something predatory in his eyes. Besides, I had the pleasure of spending the evening with the most beautiful woman in the restaurant. I felt my cheeks flush with pleasure. When was the last time Jonah had said something like that about me? Outside the restaurant, Felix hugged me goodbye, his embrace lasting several seconds too long. See you Monday, gorgeous, he whispered in my ear. The drive home was silent except for the soft jazz playing on the radio. I stared out the window, replaying every moment of Felix's attention, every compliment, every touch. Did you have fun tonight? Jonah asked as we pulled into our apartment complex parking garage. There was something in his tone that should have warned me, but I was still floating on Felix's validation. I did, actually, I said. Felix is so easy to talk to, so engaging. I noticed. What's that supposed to mean? Jonah parked the car and turned off the engine, but he didn't move to get out. In the dim garage lighting, his profile looked carved from stone. It means I noticed how engaging you found him, he said quietly. How much you enjoyed his hands all over you at our anniversary dinner. Don't be ridiculous, I snapped. We were just talking. He's a tactile person. A tactile person. Yes, some people express themselves physically. It doesn't mean anything. Jonah finally looked at me, and something in his eyes made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling away. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just enjoying some harmless attention from an attractive man who appreciated me. If you say so, Jonah said, getting out of the car. That night, as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, I saw that Felix had tagged me in a social media post. Best night, best company, along with a photo of our table at the restaurant. In the picture, his arm was clearly around my shoulders, and I was leaning into him, laughing at something he'd said. Jonah was barely visible in the background, his face turned away. I liked the post and added a comment. Such a fun evening. Beside me, Jonah was already asleep, or pretending to be. But I noticed his breathing wasn't quite right, too controlled to be natural. When I woke up the next morning, Jonah was already gone. His side of the bed was cold, and I could hear him moving around in his study. When I padded to the kitchen for coffee, I saw him through the open doorway, sitting at his desk with several manila folders spread out in front of him. What are you working on so early? I called out. Just organizing some bills, he replied, without looking up. But something about the careful way he closed one of the folders when I approached made me pause. Since when did Jonah lock away household bills? Monday morning brought an unexpected surprise. As I settled at my desk with my coffee, My coworker Nate rushed over, his phone in hand and his eyes bright with excitement. "Rema, you have to see this," he said, barely containing his glee. "You're famous." "What are you talking about?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Nate showed me his phone screen. Someone had recorded a video at the restaurant Saturday night, probably another diner who recognized the drama unfolding at our table. The clip showed Felix feeding me a bite of his dessert while I laughed, his other hand resting possessively on my thigh. In the background, Jonah sat stone-faced, staring at his untouched plate. The caption read, "Bold wife energy or just disrespectful? You decide." The video had been shared over 300 times since Sunday evening, with comments ranging from supportive, "Get it, girl," to scathing, "That poor husband." "This is insane," I breathed, scrolling through the comments. Who would record someone's private dinner? "Are you kidding?" Nate laughed. "This is gold. Look at those numbers. You're trending on 3 different platforms." I felt a strange mix of mortification and exhilaration. People were talking about me, sharing my image, debating my choices. When was the last time I'd been the center of this much attention? "Rema," the stern voice of my manager, Priya, cut through my thoughts. "Could I see you in my office, please?" My stomach dropped. Priya was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who valued professionalism above all else. As I followed her into her corner office, I tried to prepare an explanation. "Sit down," Priya said, closing the door behind us. "I'm sure you can guess why you're here." "If this is about that video," "It is." Priya pulled up the clip on her computer screen. "This was taken at a public restaurant, showing you in what appears to be an intimate situation with Felix, while your husband sits right there. It's been shared by several of our donors and board members." "It's not what it looks like," I said quickly. "Felix and I are just friends. We work well together, and some people are more physically affectionate than others. There's nothing inappropriate happening." Priya paused the video at the moment when Felix's hand was clearly on my thigh, my head thrown back in laughter. "Rema, I need you to understand something. Your personal life is your business, but when it becomes public in a way that reflects on this organization, it becomes my business too." "I haven't done anything wrong," I insisted. "I'm allowed to have friends. I'm allowed to enjoy myself." "You're also allowed to use discretion," Priya replied. "Several major donors have already called to express concern about the moral character of our staff. Whether that's fair or not doesn't matter. It's reality." I felt my face heating up. "So I'm supposed to be some kind of nun because a few uptight donors don't approve of me having male friends?" "You're supposed to be professional," Priya said firmly. "And right now, this video suggests otherwise. I need you to be more careful about how you conduct yourself, both in public and in the office." "Fine," I said, standing up. "Is that all?" "For now. But Rema, this isn't going away just because we talked about it. Be smart." I left Priya's office feeling angry and defensive. Who were these people to judge me? I wasn't doing anything wrong. Felix and I were friends. Close friends, maybe, but friends nonetheless. If people wanted to read more into it, that was their problem. Back at my desk, I found Felix waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Rough morning?" he asked, handing me one of the cups. "Apparently being friendly is now a crime," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Priya basically accused me of being unprofessional because of that stupid video. "That's ridiculous," Felix said, perching on the edge of my desk. "You're one of the most dedicated people here. Just because you're confident and comfortable with yourself doesn't mean you're unprofessional." "Exactly." I felt validated by his support. "I'm not going to apologize for being myself." "Good," Felix said, his hand briefly covering mine. "Don't let them dim your light." Throughout the day, I found myself checking the video's engagement metrics. The shares had climbed to over 800, and the comments section had become a battlefield between people defending me and people calling me everything from shameless to a cheating wife. I deleted the negative comments and responded to the positive ones, gradually crafting a narrative that felt empowering rather than embarrassing. I wasn't a cheating wife. I was a confident woman who refused to be controlled by outdated expectations. By Tuesday, I decided to lean into the attention rather than hide from it. I posted a photo of myself at the office, looking professional and polished, with the caption, "Confidence is not a crime, neither is friendship. Know your worth, are confident women." The post got more engagement than anything I'd ever shared before. Dozens of women commented with fire emojis and supportive messages about not letting anyone dim their shine. But that evening, when I got home, I found Jonah in his study again, this time with what looked like a spreadsheet open on his computer screen. When he heard me come in, he quickly minimized the window. "How was work?" he asked, but his tone was distant, polite. "Fine," I replied. "What are you working on?" "Just some lesson plans," he said, but I noticed he'd closed the laptop entirely. At dinner, our 7-year-old daughter Maya looked between us with the perceptive eyes that children have for adult tension. "Why is everyone so quiet?" she asked, pushing her peas around her plate. "We're just tired, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Daddy looks sad," Maya observed. "Are you sad, Daddy?" Jonah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm fine, Maya. Eat your vegetables." After Maya went to bed, I tried to bridge the growing distance between Jonah and me. "I know this whole video thing has been weird," I said, finding him on the living room couch with a stack of papers. "But it's really not a big deal. People will forget about it in a few days." Jonah looked up from his papers, and I was startled by the exhaustion in his eyes. "Will they?" he asked quietly. "Of course they will. It's just social media drama. It doesn't mean anything." "It means something to me," he said. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means watching my wife flirt with another man at our anniversary dinner, then seeing it broadcast to hundreds of strangers, means something to me." I felt my defenses rising. "I wasn't flirting. Felix and I are friends. Good friends. I'm sorry if that threatens you, but I'm not going to apologize for having relationships outside of our marriage." "Relationships," Jonah repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, relationships. Friendships. Human connections. Just because I married you doesn't mean I cease to exist as an individual person." Jonah stared at me for a long moment, then returned to his papers without another word. That night, I lay awake scrolling through the comments on my confidence post, basking in the support from strangers who understood that I was just being authentic. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of Felix's hands and his whispered compliments. I didn't notice that Jonah never came to bed at all. The non-profit's annual donor mixer was held on the rooftop of the Meridian Hotel, with string lights twinkling overhead, and the city skyline providing a dramatic backdrop. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a black cocktail dress that hugged my curves and made me feel powerful, confident, irresistible. Felix found me within minutes of my arrival, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of champagne and a smile that made my pulse quicken. "You look incredible," he murmured, his eyes traveling appreciatively down my body. "Absolutely stunning." "Thank you," I said, accepting the champagne and feeling that familiar thrill of being desired. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He was wearing a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, and his hair was styled in that effortlessly tousled way that probably took 20 minutes to achieve. Several other women at the event had already shot appreciative glances in his direction. "Dance with me?" he asked, extending his hand as the small jazz ensemble began playing something slow and sultry. I hesitated for exactly half a second before placing my hand in his. The dance floor was small, intimate, and Felix pulled me close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made my head spin. "This is nice," he said, his breath warm against my ear as we swayed to the music. "It is," I agreed, letting myself melt into his embrace. His hand was firm on my lower back, guiding my movements, and I felt more alive than I had in months, Rema. The voice cut through my reverie like ice water. I turned to see Jonah standing at the edge of the dance floor, wearing his best suit and an expression I couldn't quite read. "Jonah," I said, stepping back from Felix, but not entirely out of his arms. "What are you doing here?" "You mentioned the event," he said evenly. "I thought I'd surprise you." "That's sweet," I said, though I felt more annoyed than pleased. This was my work event, my moment to shine, and now I had to worry about Jonah's feelings and reactions. "Mind if I cut in?" Jonah asked, though his tone suggested it wasn't really a question. Felix's hand tightened slightly on my waist. "Actually, we were just—" "Of course," I said quickly, not wanting to cause a scene. "Felix, this is my husband, Jonah. Jonah, Felix." The two men shook hands with the careful politeness of dogs circling each other, and I felt a thrill at being the center of their attention, the prize they were both vying for. "I'll get us some drinks," Felix said, his fingers trailing across my arm as he stepped away. "The usual for you, beautiful." I nodded, ignoring Jonah's sharp intake of breath at the endearment. As Felix disappeared into the crowd, Jonah took his place, but the dynamic was entirely different. Where Felix had been warm and commanding, Jonah felt stiff, distant. "Having fun?" he asked as we began to move to the music. "I was," I said pointedly. "This is a work event, Jonah. I need to network, to be social." "Is that what you call it?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "You tell me, Rema. You're the one who was practically wrapped around your coworker in front of your professional colleagues." I felt my temper flare. I was dancing, at a social event, with a friend. "I'm sorry if that embarrasses you, but I'm not going to shrink myself just to make you comfortable." "Shrink yourself," Jonah repeated quietly. "Is that what you think I want?" "Isn't it? You want me to be the quiet little wife who stands in the corner and doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't have any fun, doesn't—" "I want you to respect our marriage," Jonah interrupted, his voice still low but with an edge that made several nearby couples glance in our direction. "I want you to remember that you have a husband who loves you instead of acting like you're single and available." "I'm not acting like anything," I hissed. "I'm being myself. I'm being confident and social and fun, all the things you used to love about me before you became this boring, jealous person who can't stand to see me happy." Jonah's face went very still. "I see." "Do you? Because I'm starting to think you don't see me at all anymore." The song ended, and Jonah stepped back with the careful movements of someone who was holding himself together by sheer will. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't think I do see you anymore." Before I could ask what he meant, Felix reappeared with our drinks and a concerned expression. "Everything okay here?" he asked, sliding a protective arm around my waist. "Everything's fine," I said, leaning into Felix's warmth and ignoring the way Jonah's eyes followed the movement. "Jonah was just leaving." "Actually, I think I'll stay," Jonah said, surprising me. "Since this is a work event, I'd love to meet more of Rema's colleagues." For the next hour, I watched in growing frustration as Jonah worked the room with quiet efficiency. He spoke with donors about educational initiatives, discussed community programs with board members, and generally charmed everyone with his thoughtful questions and genuine interest in the nonprofit's mission. Meanwhile, Felix and I danced, laughed, and enjoyed each other's company, but I found myself constantly aware of Jonah's presence, his careful observation of our interactions. "He's watching us," Felix murmured during one particularly intimate slow dance. "Let him watch," I said defiantly, tilting my head back to meet Felix's gaze. "I'm not doing anything wrong." "Of course not," Felix agreed, his thumb stroking along my spine. "You're just being yourself. If he can't handle that, it's his problem." "Exactly," I said, feeling validated. I refused to apologize for being confident and social. As if to prove my point, I let Felix dip me dramatically at the end of the song, laughing as he pulled me back up into his arms. The move drew applause from other dancers, and I felt radiant, powerful, alive. When I looked around for Jonah, he was gone. I found him later on the hotel's observation deck, standing alone at the railing and staring out at the city lights. "There you are," I said, joining him at the railing. "Why did you disappear?" "I got what I came for," he said without looking at me. "Which was what?" "Clarity." Something in his tone made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling away. I was tired of walking on eggshells around his moods. "Look, if you're upset about Felix—" "I'm not upset about Felix," Jonah said, finally turning to face me. "Felix is exactly what he appears to be. You're the one I don't understand anymore." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been married to you for 8 years, and I thought I knew who you were. But the woman I've been watching tonight, the woman in that video, I don't know her at all." "Maybe you never knew me as well as you thought," I said, the words coming out harsher than I intended. "Maybe I've just finally found the courage to be myself instead of the person you wanted me to be." Jonah stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe you have," he said quietly. "Maybe you have." The drive home was silent, but it felt different from our usual comfortable quiet. This silence was heavy, loaded with unspoken accusations and growing resentment. When we got home, I immediately went to our bedroom and posted a series of photos from the event on social media. Felix and me laughing together, Felix spinning me on the dance floor, Felix's arm around my waist, as we posed with other colleagues. The engagement was immediate and intoxicating. Dozens of likes, comments about how happy I looked, how good Felix and I looked together, how confident and radiant I seemed. I was so absorbed in responding to comments that I didn't notice Jonah standing in the doorway until he spoke. "Interesting captions," he said, his voice carefully neutral. I looked up to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "What do you mean?" "Living my best life with the best people," he read from my phone screen. "Confidence is everything. Dancing the night away with my favorite partner." So I'm wondering if anyone looking at those photos would know you're married." I felt my defenses rise again. "Not everything has to be about you, Jonah. These are my work colleagues, my professional network. I'm building my personal brand." "Your personal brand," he repeated. "Yes. Some of us are trying to build careers and make connections instead of just existing." The words hung in the air between us like a slap. I saw something flicker in Jonah's eyes. Hurt, maybe, or recognition. "I see," he said quietly. "Well, don't let me interfere with your brand building." He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Just out of curiosity," he said without turning around, "what exactly is your brand? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like a married woman who's forgotten she's married." "That's not—" I started, but he was already gone. I stared at the empty doorway for a moment, then returned to my phone. Within minutes, I was lost again in the validation of strangers who saw me as confident, successful, desirable. I didn't notice that Jonah spent the night in his study, or that he was up until 3 a.m. working on something that required multiple folders and careful documentation. I was too busy basking in the glow of Felix's late-night text. "You were absolutely radiant tonight. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Sunday dinner at my mother's house had always been a family tradition, but this week felt different. As I sat around the familiar oak table in Rosa's cozy dining room, I could feel the undercurrent of tension that seemed to follow me everywhere lately. "Maya, honey, tell Grandma about your art project," my mother said, serving our 7-year-old daughter another helping of her famous enchiladas. Maya looked up from her plate, her dark eyes serious. "I drew our family," she said quietly. "But Daddy looks sad in it." "Oh?" Rosa glanced between Jonah and me with the sharp awareness of a mother who'd raised 3 children. "Can you show us?" Maya pulled out a folded piece of construction paper from her backpack. The drawing showed 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. The figure representing me was tall and colorful, with a big smile and flowing hair. Maya had drawn herself in the middle, holding both parents' hands, but the figure representing Jonah was noticeably smaller, hunched over with a tiny frown. "Why is Daddy so small?" Rosa asked gently. Maya shrugged. That's how he looks now. Tiny and sad. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt heat creeping up my neck as I became aware that everyone was looking at me expectantly. Kids see things differently, I said with a forced laugh. Don't you, sweetheart? But Maya just nodded solemnly. Daddy used to be big and happy. Now he's tiny. Jonah cleared his throat. It's a beautiful drawing, Maya. Thank you for showing us. My father, ever the peacekeeper, quickly changed the subject to baseball, but I could feel my mother's eyes on me throughout the rest of the meal. After dinner, while Jonah helped Maya with homework in the living room, Rosa cornered me in the kitchen while I helped with dishes. Mija, she said quietly, what's going on? Nothing's going on, Mom. Everything's fine. Don't lie to me, Rosa said firmly. I've seen the videos online. I've heard the talk in the neighborhood, and I can see what's happening to that good man in there. I felt my defenses rise immediately. What talk in the neighborhood? People are saying you're having an affair with someone from work. They're saying Jonah is being humiliated while you parade around with another man. People need to mind their own business, I snapped. Felix and I are friends, colleagues. Just because we're close doesn't mean anything inappropriate is happening. Rosa studied my face with the penetrating gaze that had always been able to see through my childhood lies. Maybe not yet, she said quietly. But you're playing with fire, Rema. And when you play with fire, everyone gets burned, including Maya. I'm not doing anything wrong, I insisted. I'm finally living my life instead of just existing. I'm being confident, making connections, building my career. I'm sorry if that threatens some people, but I won't apologize for being successful and happy. Happy? Rosa's eyebrows rose. Is that what you call this? Because your daughter thinks her father is shrinking, your husband looks like he hasn't slept in weeks, and you're all over social media with another man. That doesn't look like happiness to me, Mija. That looks like destruction. Before I could respond, Aunt Lydia appeared in the kitchen doorway. Jonah's aunt had always been direct to the point of bluntness, and at 61, she'd long since stopped caring about social niceties. I couldn't help overhearing, she said, her grey eyes fixed on me with obvious disapproval. Rema, I've known that boy since he was 12 years old. He's one of the good ones, loyal, honest, hard-working. He deserves better than this. Better than what? I demanded. Better than a wife who has friends. Better than a wife who doesn't just sit at home waiting for him to pay attention to her. Better than a wife who humiliates him publicly, Lydia said bluntly. Better than a wife who flaunts another man in his face and then acts like he's the problem for being hurt by it. I'm not flaunting anything, I protested. Felix and I work together. We're friends. We have a professional relationship that sometimes extends to social situations. If people want to read more into it than that, it says more about them than it does about me. Lydia snorted. Professional relationship. Is that what they're calling it now? What's that supposed to mean? It means I've seen the way you look at him, the way you light up when he touches you, the way you pose for pictures with him. That's not professional, Rema. That's a woman who's forgotten she made promises to someone else. I felt tears of frustration prick my eyes. Why is everyone attacking me? I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just living my life, being myself, refusing to be controlled by outdated expectations about how wives should behave. No one's trying to control you, Rosa said softly. We're trying to save you from making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. The only mistake I'm making is listening to this, I said, grabbing my purse. Jonah, Maya, we're leaving. The drive home was tense, with Maya chattering obliviously in the back seat, while Jonah and I sat in rigid silence. When we got to our apartment, Jonah immediately disappeared into his study while I helped Maya get ready for bed. Mommy, Maya said as I tucked her in, why is everyone mad? No one's mad, sweetheart, I lied. Sometimes adults just disagree about things. Are you and Daddy going to get divorced like Emma's parents? The question hit me like a physical blow. Why would you ask that? Because Emma said her parents used to fight all the time, and then they got divorced, and now she has 2 houses. And you and Daddy don't talk anymore. We're not getting divorced, I said firmly. Daddy and I love each other very much. We're just going through a difficult time right now. Okay, Maya said, but she didn't look convinced. After she fell asleep, I found myself standing outside Jonah's study, listening to the soft clicking of computer keys. When I finally knocked and entered, I found him surrounded by papers, folders, and what looked like a detailed calendar with various dates circled in red. What's all this? I asked, gesturing to the organized chaos on his desk. Just keeping track of things, he said without looking up from his computer screen. What kind of things? For the first time in days, Jonah looked directly at me. His brown eyes were tired but strangely calm, as if he'd reached some kind of decision. Important things, he said quietly. Things that matter. Something in his tone made my stomach flutter with unease, but I pushed the feeling away. I was tired of walking on eggshells, tired of everyone treating me like the villain when I was just trying to live authentically. Look, I said, perching on the edge of his desk. I know everyone's upset about Felix, but... Are you in love with him? Jonah asked suddenly. The question caught me completely off guard. What? Felix. Are you in love with him? That's not... We're friends, Jonah. I've told you that. That's not what I asked. I stared at him, my mind racing. Was I in love with Felix? I was attracted to him, certainly. I enjoyed his attention, his compliments, the way he made me feel desired and appreciated. But love? I don't know, I said honestly. I care about him. I enjoy spending time with him. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in a long time. Jonah nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. And us? He asked quietly. How do you feel about us? I love you, I said automatically. You're my husband, the father of my child. Of course I love you. But are you in love with me? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. I wanted to say yes, wanted to reassure him, wanted to bridge the growing chasm between us, but the words wouldn't come. I don't know, I whispered finally. I don't know anything anymore. Jonah stared at me for a long moment, then returned to his computer. Thank you for being honest, he said quietly. I left him there and went to bed alone, but sleep eluded me. Instead, I lay awake, scrolling through Felix's social media, looking at photos of him at various events, wondering what it would be like to be with someone who made me feel electric instead of comfortable. Around 2 a.m., I heard Jonah's study door close and his footsteps in the hallway, but instead of coming to bed, I heard the front door open and close quietly. When I looked out the window, I saw him sitting on the building's front steps, talking quietly on his phone. Even from 3 stories up, I could see the careful way he held himself, the deliberate movements of someone who was planning something important. But I was too lost in fantasies about Felix to pay much attention to what my husband might be planning. That was my first mistake. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo. On the surface, our daily routines continued unchanged. Jonah went to work, I went to work, Maya went to school. We shared meals, discussed logistics, maintained the basic framework of family life. But underneath, something fundamental had shifted. Jonah had become unnaturally calm. Where before he'd shown flashes of hurt or anger, now he was simply methodical. He spoke to me politely, helped Maya with homework, kept the household running smoothly. But there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before, as if he was observing our life from the outside rather than living it. You seem different, I commented one evening, as he organized yet another stack of papers at the kitchen table. Do I? He asked mildly, not looking up from what appeared to be bank statements. Yes. Calmer. More... I don't know. Detached. Maybe I'm just learning to accept things as they are instead of fighting them. There was something in his tone that made me uneasy, but before I could pursue it further, my phone buzzed with a text from Felix. Missing you today. Coffee tomorrow. I smiled and quickly typed back, "Always, can't wait to see you." When I looked up, Jonah was watching me with that same detached expression. "Felix?" he asked. "Yes," I said defiantly. "We're having coffee tomorrow." "Of course you are." His lack of reaction was somehow more unsettling than anger would have been. The old Jonah would have argued, would have asked me to reconsider, would have shown some emotion. This new version just nodded and returned to his papers. At work, my relationship with Felix continued to deepen. We'd progressed from coffee dates to long lunches, from professional collaboration to increasingly personal conversations. He told me about his dreams of starting his own nonprofit, his complicated relationship with his ex-girlfriend, his admiration for my strength and independence. "You're wasted in that marriage," he said one afternoon as we sat in the small cafe near our office. "You're this vibrant, ambitious, incredible woman, and he's just there, taking up space." "It's not that simple," I said, though his words sent a thrill through me. "We have Maya to think about." "Maya would be better off with a happy mother who's living authentically than with parents who are just going through the motions," Felix said, his hand covering mine across the table. "Kids can sense when adults are unhappy." I thought about Maya's drawing, about her observation that Jonah looked tiny and sad, and felt a pang of guilt. But Felix's thumb was stroking across my knuckles, and his green eyes were fixed on mine with an intensity that made my pulse race. "You deserve to be cherished," he murmured. "You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are and isn't threatened by your success." "Jonah isn't threatened by my success," I said weakly. "Isn't he? Then why does he get upset when you spend time with me? Why does he try to make you feel guilty for being yourself?" I didn't have a good answer for that. Felix made it sound so reasonable, so clear-cut. I was just being myself, and if Jonah couldn't handle that, maybe the problem was with him, not with me. That evening, I found Jonah in his study again, but this time he wasn't alone. Maya was sitting on his lap, helping him organize what looked like photographs into different piles. "What are you two doing?" I asked from the doorway. "Daddy's making a book," Maya announced proudly. "A memory book with all our pictures." "A memory book?" "Just organizing some family photos," Jonah said, his voice neutral. "Maya's helping me sort them by date." I stepped closer and saw that the photos were indeed organized chronologically. Pictures of our wedding, Maya's birth, family vacations, birthday parties. But there was something methodical about the way they were arranged that made my skin crawl. "Why now?" I asked. "Just seemed like a good time to get organized," Jonah replied, not meeting my eyes. "Make sure everything's properly documented." "Look, Mommy." Maya held up a photo from our wedding day. "You look so pretty, and Daddy looks so happy." In the photo, Jonah was gazing at me with such open adoration that it made my chest tight. When was the last time he'd looked at me like that? "That was a beautiful day," I said softly. "It was," Jonah agreed quietly. "Everything was so clear then, so simple." There was something in his tone that made me want to stay, to sit down and talk about what was happening to us, to try to bridge the growing distance. But my phone buzzed with another text from Felix, and the moment passed. Over the next week, I noticed other changes in Jonah's behavior. He'd started taking phone calls outside on the balcony, speaking in low tones that I couldn't quite make out. He'd rearranged his study, installing a small filing cabinet that he kept locked. He'd even started keeping a notebook with him, occasionally jotting down notes with the careful precision of someone documenting important information. "What are you writing in that thing?" I asked one morning as he made notes over breakfast. "Just keeping track of schedules," he said. "Maya's activities, work commitments, that sort of thing." But I noticed that he wrote down what time I left for work, what time I came home, and whether I mentioned having plans with Felix. "Are you monitoring me?" I demanded. "I'm documenting patterns," he said calmly. "There's a difference." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm learning to pay attention to details I used to overlook." The conversation was interrupted by Maya, bouncing into the kitchen, ready for school, but Jonah's words stayed with me all day. What details had he been overlooking, and why was he paying attention to them now? That afternoon, Felix and I had lunch at a new restaurant across town. It was more intimate than our usual cafe, with dim lighting and secluded booths that made the meal feel like a real date. Felix had chosen the location, and I dressed carefully for the occasion. A blue dress that brought out my eyes and made me feel confident and attractive. "You look absolutely stunning," Felix said as we were seated in a corner booth. "That dress is incredible on you." "Thank you," I said, feeling that familiar rush of validation. I wanted to look nice. "For me?" he asked with a smile that made my heart skip. "Maybe," I admitted, feeling bold. Lunch stretched into 2 hours as we talked about everything and nothing. Felix was charming, attentive, funny, everything I felt like Jonah wasn't anymore. When he suggested we take a walk through the nearby park, I agreed without hesitation. The park was beautiful in the late afternoon light, with golden sunshine filtering through the trees and couples strolling hand in hand along the winding paths. When Felix took my hand as we walked, it felt natural, right. "I need to tell you something," he said as we sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. "What is it?" "I'm falling for you," he said simply. "I know the situation is complicated, but I can't pretend anymore that this is just friendship. You're incredible, Rema. You're everything I've been looking for." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment I'd been building toward for weeks, the validation I'd been craving. Someone saw me, wanted me, thought I was incredible. "Felix," I started, but he leaned closer, his hand cupping my face. "You don't have to say anything right now," he murmured. "Just know that I'm here. When you're ready to choose happiness over obligation, I'm here." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. I kissed him back, letting myself get lost in the moment, in the feeling of being desired and cherished and alive. When we finally broke apart, I felt like I was floating. This was what I'd been missing, what I'd been craving. This was what love was supposed to feel like. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling from Felix's kiss, my mind spinning with possibilities. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did deserve to be happy. Maybe it was time to stop living for other people's expectations and start living for myself. When I got home, I found Jonah in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the same methodical precision he brought to everything these days. "How was your day?" he asked without turning around. "Fine," I said, though I could hear the breathiness in my own voice. "How was yours?" "Productive," he said, finally looking at me. "Very productive." There was something in his eyes that made me nervous, but before I could analyze it, Maya ran into the kitchen demanding help with a school project. That night, as I lay in bed replaying every moment of my afternoon with Felix, I heard Jonah moving around in his study again. When I got up to use the bathroom, I saw light under his door and heard the soft sound of papers being shuffled, organized, filed away. Whatever he was working on, he was being very thorough about it, but I was too lost in dreams of Felix to worry about what my husband might be planning. That was my second mistake. Thursday morning started like any other day. I dressed carefully in a burgundy wrap dress that Felix had complimented before, applied my makeup with extra care, and left for work feeling confident and attractive. Felix had texted the night before, suggesting we meet for lunch at the courthouse plaza. He had some errands to run downtown, and the area had several nice restaurants within walking distance. "Can't wait to see you," his message had read. "Wear something that makes you feel beautiful." I'd responded with a heart emoji and a promise to look my best. Work flew by in a blur of emails and meetings. I found myself checking the clock every few minutes, anticipating my lunch with Felix, with an excitement that felt both thrilling and guilty. We'd been growing closer every day since our kiss in the park, though we hadn't crossed any major lines yet. Still, I knew we were building toward something significant, something that would change everything. At 11:45, I touched up my lipstick and grabbed my purse, telling my coworkers I'd be back in a couple of hours. The courthouse plaza was only a 15-minute drive from the office, and I wanted to arrive looking fresh and composed. I found Felix waiting for me near the fountain in the center of the plaza, looking handsome in a navy suit and sunglasses. When he saw me approaching, his face lit up with that smile that never failed to make my pulse quicken. "There's my beautiful girl," he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a moment too long to be entirely appropriate. "You look absolutely radiant." "Thank you," I said, feeling that familiar rush of validation. "You're not looking too bad yourself." "Shall we find somewhere to eat?" he asked, taking my hand. "I'm starving." We strolled through the plaza hand in hand, drawing looks from other pedestrians. I felt bold, confident, alive, like the heroine of my own romantic story, finally claiming her happiness. "Actually," Felix said, stopping near a bench with a good view of the courthouse steps, "would you mind if we sat here for a few minutes first? It's such a beautiful day, and I love watching people." "Of course," I agreed, settling onto the bench beside him. Felix immediately put his arm around me, pulling me close against his side. "This is perfect," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Just you and me and no one to judge us or tell us we're wrong." I leaned into his embrace, feeling peaceful and content for the first time in weeks. This was what I wanted, someone who appreciated me, who made me feel special, who wasn't constantly disappointed in who I was becoming. "Rema," the voice cut through my contentment like a blade. I looked up to see Jonah walking toward us across the plaza, but he wasn't alone. A woman in a business suit was walking beside him, carrying a briefcase and an official-looking folder. My stomach dropped. "Jonah, what are you doing here?" He stopped about 10 feet away from our bench, his face calm and composed in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hello, Rema. Felix." Felix's arm tightened around me protectively. "Hey there, Jonah. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "It is," Jonah agreed. "Perfect day for taking care of important business." "What kind of business?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. The woman in the business suit stepped forward, her expression professionally neutral. "Rema Voss?" "Yes?" "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a process server, and I have some documents for you." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Documents?" Jennifer opened her folder and pulled out a thick envelope. "You're being served with a petition for dissolution of marriage, temporary custody arrangements, and a restraining order regarding marital assets." "What?" The word came out as a whisper. "Divorce papers," Jonah said quietly, "and custody documents for Maya." I stared at him in shock, my mind struggling to process what was happening. You're divorcing me." "I'm ending our marriage," he corrected. "There's a difference." Felix shifted beside me, his arm dropping away from my shoulders. Maybe I should—" "Stay," Jonah said firmly. "You're part of this conversation." Jennifer handed me the envelope, which felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hands. "You have 30 days to respond to the petition. All the information is included in the paperwork." "This is insane," I said, finding my voice. "Jonah, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can't work out adultery," Jonah said calmly. "We can't work out public humiliation. We can't work out the fact that you've chosen another man over your family." "I haven't chosen anything," I protested. "Felix and I are friends. We haven't done anything wrong." Jonah pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was a photo of Felix and me kissing in the park, clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. "This was taken last Tuesday at 3:47 p.m., he said quietly. "While you were supposed to be at work. While I was home helping our daughter with homework." The blood drained from my face. "You had me followed?" "I documented your activities," he corrected. "Just like I documented the restaurant incident, the work events, the social media posts, the text messages, and the pattern of deception that's been going on for months." "Text messages?" My voice was barely a whisper. Jonah's expression didn't change. Did you really think I didn't know about your phone password, Rema? We've been married for 8 years. I know you use Maya's birthday for everything. The implications hit me like a physical blow. He'd read everything. Every flirtatious message from Felix, every complaint I'd made about our marriage, every plan we'd made to meet in secret. You violated my privacy, I said weakly. I gathered evidence of marital misconduct, he replied. There's a legal difference. Felix finally found his voice. Look, man, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Jonah said, turning his attention to Felix for the first time. You pursued a married woman, encouraged her to betray her family, and helped destroy a child's home. That's exactly what it looks like. I didn't know. You knew she was married, Jonah said flatly. You knew she had a daughter. You knew exactly what you were doing. Felix stood up abruptly, backing away from the bench. I should go. This is between you two. Yes, you should go, Jonah agreed. And Felix, if you contact my wife again before the divorce is finalized, I'll add harassment to the restraining order. Felix looked at me with something that might have been regret or relief, then walked quickly away without another word. I watched him disappear into the crowd, abandoning me to face the consequences of our choices alone. How could you do this? I asked Jonah, tears finally starting to fall. How could you humiliate me like this in public? The same way you humiliated me, he said quietly. Except I only did it once, and I did it with legal documentation instead of social media posts. Jennifer cleared her throat. Mrs. Voss, I need you to sign this receipt confirming you've been served. I signed the paper with shaking hands, barely able to see through my tears. The temporary custody arrangement gives you supervised visitation with Maya until the court hearing, Jonah continued in that same calm tone. You can see her Wednesday evenings and Saturday afternoons, with a neutral third party present. Supervised visitation, I gasped. She's my daughter. She's our daughter, Jonah corrected, and the court agrees that her living situation needs to be stable while we sort this out. This is insane, I repeated. You can't just take her away from me. I'm not taking her away from you. I'm protecting her from the chaos you've created. There's a difference. I looked around the plaza desperately, as if someone might materialize to tell me this was all a mistake, a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a simple explanation. But the other people in the area were giving us a wide berth, clearly recognizing the drama unfolding and wanting no part of it. Jonah, please, I said, grabbing his arm. We can fix this. I'll stop seeing Felix. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't do this to our family. He looked down at my hand on his arm, then gently but firmly removed it. You already did this to our family, he said quietly. I'm just making it official. But I love you, I said desperately. I love Maya. This is our family. No, Jonah said, his voice gentle but implacable. This was our family. What you love is the idea of having both a stable home and an exciting affair. What you love is the attention, the drama, the feeling of being desired. But you don't love the actual work of being a wife and mother. That's not true, isn't it? He pulled out his phone again and scrolled to something. This is a text you sent to Felix 3 days ago. I can't wait to be free of all this domestic drudgery. You make me remember who I really am. Does that sound like someone who loves her family? The words hit me like a slap. I remembered sending that text after a particularly frustrating evening of homework help and household chores, but seeing it quoted back to me in this context made it sound horrible, selfish. I was just venting, I said weakly. Everyone complains sometimes. Everyone doesn't plan to leave their family for their affair partner, Jonah replied. Everyone doesn't call their marriage domestic drudgery while texting with another man. Jennifer stepped forward again. I need to go, but Mrs. Voss, please make sure you read through all the documents carefully. There are important deadlines and requirements outlined in the paperwork. She handed me her business card and walked away, leaving Jonah and me alone in the plaza. 8 years, I said, looking at the divorce papers in my hands. 8 years of marriage, and you're throwing it all away because of a few text messages and one kiss. I'm not throwing anything away, Jonah said quietly. You threw it away months ago when you decided that your marriage vows were negotiable. I'm just cleaning up the mess. So that's it. You've made your decision and I don't get a say. You made your decision every time you chose Felix over me, he replied. Every time you flirted with him in public. Every time you defended him instead of our marriage. Every time you lied about where you were going and who you were with. This is just the natural consequence of the choices you've been making. I stared at him through my tears, seeing a stranger where my husband used to be. This calm, methodical man who spoke about our marriage like a business transaction was nothing like the gentle, patient person I'd married. What happened to you? I whispered. I grew up, he said simply. I stopped accepting unacceptable behavior and started demanding the respect I deserve. I stopped being the understanding husband who enables his wife's affair and became a man who protects his daughter and his dignity. And Maya, what am I supposed to tell Maya? You'll tell her the truth, that Mommy and Daddy are getting divorced because we can't live together anymore. She's smart, Rema. She's already figured out that something's wrong. She'll hate me. Maybe, Jonah said, and his honesty was brutal. But she'll respect me for protecting her from watching her mother destroy their family. And someday, when she's older, she'll understand that I gave her the most important gift a parent can give. The knowledge that she deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at me one more time. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I did love you. I loved you enough to fight for our marriage for months while you were falling for someone else. I loved you enough to give you chance after chance to choose us. But I love myself and our daughter too much to keep begging you to want the life we built together. Jonah, wait. But he was already walking away, his shoulders straight and his steps confident. I watched him disappear into the crowd, taking 8 years of marriage and the life I'd taken for granted with him. I sat on that bench for another 20 minutes, clutching the divorce papers and staring at the courthouse steps where my marriage had officially ended. People walked by, going about their normal days, completely unaware that my entire world had just collapsed. My phone buzzed with a text, and for a wild moment I hoped it was Jonah, telling me this was all a mistake, that we could still work things out. But it was Felix. Hey, that was intense. I think we should cool things off for a while until you get your situation sorted out. Take care of yourself. I stared at the message in disbelief. The man I'd risked everything for was abandoning me now that the consequences had become real. The great love affair that was supposed to justify destroying my marriage had evaporated the moment it became inconvenient. I was alone on a courthouse bench, holding divorce papers, having lost my husband, my daughter, and my lover all in the span of 30 minutes. And the worst part was that I finally understood that Jonah was right. I had made my choices, one selfish decision at a time, until I'd built a wall between myself and my family that couldn't be torn down. The confident, independent woman I thought I was becoming had turned out to be just a selfish person who wanted everything without consequences. And now I had to live with the reality of what I'd chosen. I folded the divorce papers carefully, put them in my purse, and walked slowly back to my car. There would be lawyers to call, custody arrangements to figure out, a new life to build from the ashes of the old one. But first, I had to go home to an empty apartment and figure out how to explain to my 7-year-old daughter why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore.